Hi guys, and welcome to the Lifestyle Design Secrets podcast, where we talk about fitness, nutrition, mindset, and a whole lot more. Thank you for everyone who's listened to all our episodes so far and taken the time to leave a review. If you do enjoy this episode and want the free content to keep on coming, please do take 2 seconds to leave us a 5-star review. Thanks again. Now let's dive in. Hello everyone, today I am here with Marie, who is a nutrition student based in the Netherlands. So thank you for Marie for being up at some funny time of the night to talk to me. And Marie is actually going to take charge today. She's going to be interviewing me, and I'll let her get started.
Awesome. So welcome, Amy, today. Thanks for your time. I'm happy we managed to make it work with the time difference. I'm Marie. I'm studying health, nutrition, and psychology in the Netherlands. And today's interview will be about how do experts perceive health messages on social media and what influences their perception. And this is just used for a uni-related project. So to give you a bit of a background about the idea of the study itself, so research shows so far that there's a progressive use of internet for communication. So people use it more and more to search for medical or health related information, especially also now on social media. A lot of professionals, also social media users, can post health information and use that to communicate. Are you aware of the purpose of the study, the interview, the background, or do you have any questions left to ask before we start?
No, I think I'm all sorted.
Good. So you also consent to the terms and the recording as well. That's fine.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Then, also introduce yourself and tell me a bit more how you came across, or how do you usually come across health information, and what's your link to social media health informations?
So my background in health and nutrition started at university as well. So I studied the geographies of kind of human geography, so it was the geographies of health, and particularly the geographies of obesity and the epidemiology of obesity. So how, as a disease, obesity is spreading throughout the world and throughout our environment. And it's quite huge at the moment, obviously, with the changing built-up world and fast food and things. So we're getting to a stage of society now where actually our built-up environment affects our nutrition in a huge way and our likelihood of developing things like obesity and other diseases. So that, I suppose, since I did my studies, oh my gosh, like 15 years ago I would have finished. So I think since then the digital landscape has obviously taken a huge turn and is a far bigger area. So as well as that, I studied holistic nutrition and integrative nutrition with the Institute of Integrative Nutrition in New York. So I do take a holistic approach and look at things like social media, like where people get their information from, how stressful their job is, and all aspects of their life that can have an effect on their health and fitness or lack of. So that's my background. And did I miss part of that question?
Just like which platforms do you use, like social media platforms, and how you therefore come across health information, or maybe since you're an expert in that, do you even post stuff about health or nutrition?
Yeah. So I'd say in terms of consumption of nutrition advice, I use social media for kind of bite-sized segments and to get a gauge on what people are talking about topically. But I probably use deeper channels, things like podcasts, audiobooks, things like that, and experts that I really trust in their field to gauge, any deeper or medical information. And I'm quite a geek as well. I do like to go deep and then, look up studies they've talked about and things like that. So go as deep as scientific journals and what's happening in the literature rather than just the sort of surface stuff, I suppose. But in terms of communicating with people and getting those complicated nutritional concepts through to the layperson who, the really busy parent who's sat demolishing ice cream as they double screen on the sofa at night, like watching Netflix and scrolling Instagram. I use Facebook. As that the average age on Facebook at the moment is 40.5 in New Zealand, and Instagram is 34.5. So that's quite a good demographic for me. Often people in that age range are feeling quite lost, I suppose, on their nutrition journey. And so that I have toyed with TikTok, but not quite there yet. But I do think I have stepchildren, to give you a little bit of background, and they constantly come into the kitchen wanting to make things like Oreo milkshakes because they've seen it on TikTok. So it's all over the place. So yeah, those are the platforms that I use. But yeah, it's definitely, I think you have to be quite careful these days where you get your info from.
But it seems like you're very spread, sort of.
Yeah.
Like different platforms.
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there like specific kinds of health information you come across mostly? Like more like related to sports or nutrition or?
I think you need to be careful with social media because it can quickly become a self-fulfilling prophecy of if you search for something, that's what will start appearing in your algorithm. So if you start following certain people or certain doctors who are into veganism or a paleo approach to something or the carnivore diet, more of that sort of stuff starts coming up in your algorithm, and it can all very quickly become one-sided. So I'd say I quite actively seek out quite a range of information to kind of see what's going on in the world of nutrition.
Awesome. I mean, you touched up upon like my next question, sort of. What are your thoughts on health messages you encounter on social media platforms?
What a topic. Well, it's a bit of a cesspit, to be honest, isn't it? I think, like the world at large. Yeah, it's bad. Like, I think you have to be really careful. But I'm going to compare social media to the fact that you look at an everyday supermarket. I do know European supermarkets are better. I'll give you that. I'm from Europe, so I know. But like in New Zealand, like you walk through the supermarket and there are all these cereal packets, like highly processed, extremely sugary cereal. It's incredibly bad for your health, with all these incredible health star messages and lowers your cholesterol, gluten-free, packed with fiber. And it's like, it's such terribly misleading messaging. So I think, yes, social media can be quite a cesspit if you're not looking for the right people with the right background and the right qualifications, or people who do look at things with a holistic approach. So quite often you'll find people who are very sort of dogmatic about certain things. So believe a calorie is a calorie, and whether you get that from ice cream or an apple, it doesn't matter. So I think it's a bit of a mess, but so do I think is our food system. So yeah, it's probably just as bad online as it is offline, I reckon.
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
You're definitely right with that. Do you see any advantages? I mean, you touched upon a few disadvantages already, but do you see advantages as well?
Hugely, yeah. So I think there are a lot of really amazing, I think social media has given a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily be a voice on nutrition a platform. So if they have a good sound personality, are willing to share a message that they believe is going to help people, and if they are helping people. So I'm trying to think of some examples. Things like James Smith, who's a personal trainer, very, very controversial English chap, lives in Sydney. But he's incredibly clever at taking the really, really complicated medical or scientific messages and making them so simple, like so painfully simple, but also funny. So I think social media is an incredible place for people who are between the experts and the layperson to be able to spread and share the messages to make them more tangible, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I also think it's a really special place for people to be able to find knowledge that is not what you see on supermarket shelves and not necessarily what the government is saying. So an example, I'm pregnant at the moment, which is exciting, but the pregnancy nutrition guidelines, oh my gosh, they're terrible. Like, yeah, they're dirt poor. They're worse than the ordinary kind of government guidelines. And so I think social media gives you that avenue that if you're someone who's prepared to do the research, you can get into the science and the nitty gritty and the old wisdom before food companies started funding nutrition foundations that write the guidelines. So I think it's quite a good place for that.
Congratulations on the pregnancy.
Thanks.
No, but that's a really good answer. Do you want to add anything like disadvantages you just thought of, or any other advantages you just thought of by speaking?
I don't know. I think they're so intrinsically linked, the advantages and the disadvantages.
Yeah.
So a lot. Yeah, it's so tricky. Like there's another lady in New Zealand called Mickey Willardon, who's really incredible nutritionist, very into endurance training, a big advocate for things like protein. And she had a lot of clients turn around to her and say, you advocate all these animal products, but this new Netflix documentary that's just come out called You Are What You Eat, like says that it's best to be vegan. What do I do? So I think whilst social media gives you the ability to do your own research and become really informed, it's also a very confusing place for people if they don't know what they're looking for.
Yeah. No, that makes sense, definitely. Awesome. You said something about like Europe versus New Zealand. Do you think there's a huge difference between those countries, like with social media health messages, maybe the use of social media?
Yes. I think, first of all, I will say I hugely miss Europe, and over there, first of all, things are better regulated. So there's a huge program going through the UK at the moment to limit greenwashing. Have you heard that before?
Yes.
So, yeah, where things are called organic or they're called natural, and there are things like a sugar tax coming in. But in New Zealand, I'd say there are still a hell of a lot of companies on social media, on packaging, on everything, getting away with labeling their products as healthy, slapping health messages on, saying that, things come from a certain place, or, because it's packed with fiber, it's really good for you. We'll just ignore all the sugar and the processed crap. Like, it's really bad. Like, it's the lack of regulation. And I think in Europe, possibly because of the huge amount of tradition and culture, I think there's a deep understanding not to read too much into some of the health messages, the kind of newfangled flashy stuff, like, you know, in France, you tell people to stop eating bread and cheese and drinking wine, or tell them to stop drinking coffee, they'd tell you where to go, right? So whereas in New Zealand, I would say there's a very little understanding of the fact that, you know, the French paradox, for example. So if you sit and you eat surrounded by loved ones, with your friends, with your family, and you do eat lots of cheese and drink wine at lunchtime, but it's over 3 hours in a relaxed state. You process that food very differently to if you're grabbing a sandwich full of cheese in your car, rushing on the way to a meeting. I think there are a lot of cultural nuances that you guys have in Europe, perhaps as an undertone that we don't have in New Zealand. And so I think people are trying to learn the basics of nutrition without as such a deep cultural heritage, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely. So you also, from what it sounds like, also that New Zealand is a bit less strict on all of that, like regulation-wise.
I would say.
So
I mean,
compared to Europe,
yeah, I'd say there's some pretty shocking stuff still allowed over in Europe as well. But there's also interesting nuances. So, like French cheese, for example. A lot of people from here comment they can go to France, they can eat the cheese. They can go to Italy, they can eat the pizza. Because it's made in such different and traditional ways, like a lot of the cheese in France isn't pasteurized. Greek yogurt. I love Greek yogurt in Europe. Love it, live off it. Here, the closest I can get still makes my skin break out in acne. Like, it's very interesting. It's very different process. So like the regulation from the way the food is produced through to the way it's marketed or talked about on social media, I think there are definite differences, I would say. I think we're probably more Americanized here. Americanized or Australianized.
Yeah, that could be.
Be. Young country problems.
Yes, I lived in New Zealand for 2.5 years, so I can agree.
How did you find it? Did you notice much of a difference?
Yes, honestly, food-wise, there's a huge difference for me between New Zealand and Europe, or at least, Germany, Netherlands. Yeah, there's a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm quite jealous knowing you're there.
I definitely agree with you. And it's even worse having the comparison between those two and knowing that it's so different.
Yeah. Welcome to my world.
So going back to like the idea of social media, since we just talked about like the idea of like regulations in Europe and regulations in New Zealand. So you would also say maybe coming across a nutritionist in Europe versus nutritionists in New Zealand, there's also quite a big difference on social media channels, how they communicate or the communication itself. Or maybe the topics they talk about.
I probably couldn't draw a comparison that broad because it's so individualized by people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there are some people doing some great things in all countries, to be honest. What I will say is probably, I don't follow enough people from Europe and the Netherlands, probably because it wouldn't be in English, so I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know what they were talking about. But what I would say, again, do you follow Jessie, the glucose goddess?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know much.
She is someone to look up, very clever biochemist, but again, really clever lady, making things very understandable and very tangible. She started wearing a glucose monitor and has other people wearing blood glucose monitors. So she shares things like, you know, how you can enjoy a croissant with ham and cheese. And because you're eating the carbohydrates with all that delicious fat and protein, the blood glucose response is barely anything. But if you eat a chocolate croissant, for example, blood glucose is enormous. So she shares how you can really enjoy traditional foods without spiking your blood glucose and then spiking your insulin, which leads to fat storage and brain problems, things like that. So I think there are possibly some people over in Europe who are sharing nutritional messaging with a little bit more cultural nuance, maybe. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but there's also people in England, probably more than Europe, but who are still at the very basic end of things as well. So yeah, what I will say is I think, especially from what I've seen in England, a lot of the people are going, it's okay to eat sandwiches. You can eat sandwiches and still lose weight. So, or processed food. And it's almost like they're trying to normalize the processed food so that people can still eat processed food and lose weight. Whereas I think a better approach is to kind of take it back and educate people from the real basics. Yeah, so probably a bit of a difference there.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree. So you kind of said something about like there's a lot of information, for example, now the processed food, which you maybe would say you don't agree all the time. So how would you distinguish between like true facts and maybe misinformation if you like scroll through social media and you come across a post, or you said you listen to podcasts, so you listen to a specific podcast. How do you distinguish if they're talking about true facts or if there's some misinformation?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think having a bit of a deep and innate knowledge now, I can tend to be able to call bullshit on things. But it's I hope that's allowed in your university, by the way. Sorry to swear. But, it is tricky because I think it's a doctor in the UK actually, Chris Van Tulloken, who just did a book about he ate only processed food for a while. And processed food, he quite rightly includes cereal and like bread, toast. You know, it's got 16, 17 ingredients, thickeners, all sorts of strange things. Like if you think about the grain that like grows in the ground to how it becomes a piece of bread, like it's bonkers. Like it's definitely been processed. Or like rice to Cocoa Pops. Like they're so hyper palatable. So he was talking about the fact that we really, really need to start regulating things like cereal and bread as processed food items. But there was a lot of kickback because people were going, well, they're not burgers, they're not fast food, they're not deep fried. And it's like, so who's right? I think it's less about understanding the misinformation. I think there's a huge debate amongst the people who are experts. Does that make sense? Who are doctors?
Yeah.
Who are scientists? Like they don't even know. They can't decide between them what the right answer is, if that makes sense.
So that's like a battle between already the specialists. Is that kind of what you
think? I think you can go and you can find information from someone with a PhD in nutrition, someone who works in food science, someone who's an obesity specialist, you know, in all fields, and some will be advocating veganism and some will be advocating a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet. And I think if, in answer to your question and for the layperson, I would say that it's always worth asking what people's intentions are behind the information. So if they share a lot of information and they seem to be genuinely helping people, I think there's a lot to be said for that. If they are trying to sell something that is in one particular area of dogma, or trying to push products like supplements, is something you see a lot. Quite like, don't disagree with them, but maybe that's when you should start to question things a little bit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yes. Do you have any other attributes you might think of which help you to distinguish if you come across a post or like a podcast, if it's true facts, misinformation, any other facts you can hold on to?
So tools that I use to decipher fact from fiction. I think the KISS rule, keep it simple, stupid, is always a good one. So I think if you're looking at something going, oh my gosh, I must need to take all of these supplements or cut out all of these foods in order to be healthy. Like if it seems like a very complicated message, or it sounds like you need to turn your life completely upside down, even though you're relatively healthy at the moment, question it. Like, I think if someone is selling you a health food that has 20 ingredients, question it. If someone's selling you something that looks suspiciously like a chocolate bar that's meant to be healthy, question it. Just really, really tuning into your common sense. But again, a lot of nuance around this. I'm loving this conversation because it's probably not something I've ever really delved into much before. Don't like attacking people too much, but it's very complicated because there are doctors and nutritionists on New Zealand television or on New Zealand social media promoting cereal, saying that this is what they recommend for the All Blacks. And it's like, well, no shit, they run around for like 6 hours a day. But that's not your everyday person. So it's very nuanced again. Like, should you trust them? Yeah, they're probably trustworthy people wanting to do a good job. But does that apply to someone who does 3,000 steps a day and struggles to walk upstairs? No. Like, don't eat the cereal. Like, it's tricky.
So it's like also really individual person.
Very individual. Yeah, question, when you read a health message, question whether that is for you or not. Like I get a lot of people who come to me to want to lose body fat, gain energy, and they're drinking protein shake. I'm like, oh, cool. Like, why? They're like, oh, well, someone at the gym told me it'd be really good. Are you still going to the gym? No. Okay, so what's the protein shake doing for you? Like, in reality, they have no idea. They see fit and healthy people doing these things and they follow blindly. So, and I think, another broader debate is the kind of, on social media, should it be your personal responsibility to curate what you listen to, what you believe? It's very tricky. What do you think? Like, can you let us into what the study's a little bit about?
We honestly didn't really look into the studies yet that deep, and I can definitely give you some more information after the interview, because that's when we kind of start comparing also outcomes. We have a second interview going on with a consumer, so we can kind of have like your expert view on it and then a consumer's view, and it's going to be really interesting what the consumer's saying, because I feel like you really see as an expert also, and I can relate to that now studying at university, what you just touched upon. They're being critical, whatever you see. It's not applying to you immediately only because it works for someone else. And that's what you just kind of mentioned with the example of the gym and protein, definitely. And that's something which is missing definitely in the society. being critical, not like blindly trusting.
Yeah. And without sounding snooty, like that's what they teach you at university, isn't it? To critique things.
Yeah.
Look at both sides, look at the context. Like, what's it referring to? Looking at the study, looking at the what do they call R values? It was a while ago I went to university, which you can probably tell by wrinkles. But there's so much around even the statistics that come out from studies that you really need to bear in mind. And I think, it's a minefield for people, really. I'm really intrigued to hear what your consumer has to say.
Yes. I think that's something which should be taught more to society, to be more critical.
Yes. Well, yes. I think it goes without saying that a lot more education is needed. But I think it's tricky societally because at the moment the education, so the New Zealand Nutrition Foundation, for example, so I'm using New Zealand as an example because that's where I am at the moment, but their Nutrition Foundation guidelines, they advocate eating 7 to 8 servings of grains a day in a healthy form, like breakfast biscuits. To me, that doesn't sound like good advice. It's quite highly processed. So I delved a little bit deeper, and the sponsors of the New Zealand Nutrition Foundation, are you ready? They are McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Sanitarium, which is quite a big food company over here. I think like Heinz or Watties, like baked beans and ketchup and things.
Yeah.
Like it's bad. Like it's really bad. So that is the trusted source for New Zealanders. So I do think people should question more, for sure. Because I think really get to know your sources, I think would be a good note for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you totally.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about like for you it depends on intention as well. Maybe you want to elaborate a bit more on how you actually find out what people's intention are. Like, are you able to just judge that by one post you come across, one podcast you come across, or are you actually diving deeper into it? I guess it's
no, nothing. Yeah, it's quite hard, and I will give you a little bit of an insight as well. So the rest of my background, my other business is a marketing company. So I actually started my career in food marketing, so for natural energy drinks. And so I know firsthand what messages companies leave in and which ones they leave out. It's scary but true. This was a very long time ago, but so we would focus on things like natural energy. The flavors were lemon, lime, and ginger. Very healthful. Wouldn't say that it's actually full of sugar from natural grape juice. So it's a very tricky kind of thing to work out, because even well-intentioned companies, so that one, for example, was trying to make a sugar-free drink. It was very full of processed natural sugar. So I think would you mind repeating the question again, just so I can really clarify down to it?
Just like, how do you find out the intention of the person you come across? Because you said earlier, intention is quite an important aspect for you to determine if it's misinformation or not.
I would, if it's from a company, I would question it, I suppose, is the first like first aspect of that. So if it's from someone if it's from a food or drink company, so if they are trying to sell you food or drinks, it's always a good question to ask yourself. And you don't need to get all suspicious and nasty. Just do your research and flip the label around, like read the ingredient label or visit their website and have a look. I think anyone promoting anything that is get fit quick, basically. So there's a very, very he's not untrustworthy. He's a great guy. He's called Alex Hormozy. He's actually a businessman, I suppose, but his one of the first businesses he started was called Gym Launch. So he started gyms and he helped people launch gyms. But he explains how there are two things that make people want to buy stuff and two things that kind of draw people away. So when people are first looking for something, they want to know, will it work? And am I guaranteed results? So those are the two pluses. If it looks like it works and I'm guaranteed results, winner. And then taken away from that are how much time and effort will it take from me? And like, how much does it cost? So if you see something like, guaranteed abs in 7 minutes, they're going, we're promising you your dream result in no time at all. It's only going to take you 7 minutes and it only costs $29. That is incredibly clever marketing. If you're looking for something that's going to fix your body in 7 minutes, it's likely not going to last. And you probably need to change your approach. So just trying to think about how smart the messaging is. Because if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, let me kind of quickly summarize. So, what you kind of said about the attributes you take into account, I guess.
Yeah.
When you, distinguish between true facts or some fiction. So you kind of touched upon like personality of the person you watch the video or listen to the podcast. Then the intention of them, the way they phrase their message, like with the kiss example you brought up, and then sort of also who it is, like is it an expert or like a company? So that's what you said, right? Like those are certain facts you look at, definitely.
Yeah, and I would say, again, it's tricky to say, like, qualifications are really helpful, but some doctors will advocate veganism, some will advocate, like low-fat diet still. Like, it's a real mixed bag. And some doctors are morbidly obese and really unwell. So it's tricky, so looking at a combination of factors, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
But yeah, in summary, I reckon, that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Kind of go ahead with our interview. You said already that if you come across information, you kind of double check for yourself. You maybe do your research. Do you do anything else before you use certain information you come across?
So any information that I would share?
Yeah, for example.
Yeah, so I'm quite big on checking. If I get information and I'm like, that is such an interesting fact or study, I always go to the source. Mm-hmm. So whether that's a new obesity statistic from the World Health Organization or whether it's a new study that's just come out, it's always worth referencing, looking a little bit deeper into it, looking at the actual study itself, even if it's just reading the abstract and the conclusion, but just getting the true vibe of the actual study and what intention that was done with is always worth it, because there's some very attention-grabbing headlines out there, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you take like is this a certain order of steps you take when you come across, so you like double check, you read the study eventually if you have access to the study, and then you could share the information, because then for yourself you could double check if it was actually like true.
Yeah. So I suppose from my perspective, I have nearly 200 clients I've worked with now in the last few years. So I have kind of, if someone tells me a new bit of information, I'm a bit skeptical about it. I've got a lot of real life evidence of what's worked for me, what's worked for my clients, what I already know to be true, like backed by science and the studies that I've done. And then I think what I tend to look for is, yes, look at the source of news that it's coming from. Is it reputable? And then, look deeper at the study. Like, what journal has it come from? Like, is it a reputable journal? Is it linked to a university? Is it a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial? Or is it like a study of like 12 people that they were paying because they were students? You know, like there's different levels of what I'd research for each piece of information, I suppose. But that's my general tactic.
Yeah, so definitely double checking and doing your own research is the way to go.
Yeah, I know. I think people think I'm just some like blonde little girl who talks about recipes on social media. Like I'm actually a massive closet geek. Yeah.
I liked it. I have to say this is a really important aspect of like assessing information, like double checking and actually making sure it's not wrong. Like there's so
Oh
much.
yeah, it's just it's not that's another Alex Hormozy quote that I'm gonna butcher, but like if you've got an imposter syndrome or self-doubt, like you just keep going until you've got like absolutely undeniable proof that what you're doing is working. So I think that's really important as well. So if you can fully back everything that you're saying, from someone who's putting information out there, I think you have to be able to fully back it. And I feel like now with the number of clients that I've got and my years of experience, my own health journey, I feel like I've got enough evidence stacked in the deck of keeping things real and kind of wholesome. That it's sort of I think the longer you're in it, the less you have to question things too dramatically. But I think it's still really important to keep questioning everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Do you think there's something like what would you say, is there something which can be done to make it easier for the users on social media platforms to distinguish between true facts and misinformation?
That's such a tricky one. Yeah. Be careful who you follow. Like, just look after yourself. So as well as I always talk about, as well as a diet that you put in your mouth, like the information diet that you're consuming. This is exactly what you're talking about, right? So a lot of people's information diets are very messy. They will be following a ketogenic person who lost 50 kilos on keto and only eats salami and cheese. So they think that's a good way to go. And then they'll see someone else who's doing a vegan thing and losing loads of weight. And so they'll follow them. And then they'll see something on the news about Ozempic and decide that an injection's a good way to go. Like, I think, do you know what I mean? Like, I think, I think you need to, cleaning up your information diet on social media is so worth it. Like, just even take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, do a little curation session. Go through, just delve a little bit deeper into their posts, because there's so much clickbait that's like amazing. You know, like I was saying, like 7-minute abs. Sure, okay. Let's go look at the science behind that one. Like, how many times do you have to do the 7-minute abs? And how many days do you have to choose chicken breast and broccoli over cake before they actually appear? Like, so I think if you actually delve more deeply into, I do think it's a personal responsibility thing, which sucks to say. Like, unless the government is going to step in or someone, like that's what I think is the answer.
Is there someone else you think could be responsible for filtering this information?
It's a really good question, because I don't know what the correct answer is, because if I said the government, they probably wouldn't like what I say, because I say leave the fat on your steak and enjoy it, whereas they tell people to cut it all off. So it's like me and a lot of other people who work in the area of natural nutrition. So who is the right person to regulate it? Really?
Like, also probably going towards like companies wanting to sell products and you saying something against that. But if they would be the ones regulating this, filtering this information, there would be like a clash.
Yeah, exactly. So so given that the people behind our New Zealand nutrition guidelines are McDonald's and Coca-Cola, should they be the ones filtering the information? Sorry, I know we started a more nuanced debate here. Bigger questions.
I guess not really, my personal opinion, but...
Because what, do you guys have any regulation over there?
I'm honestly not that much into regulation. Also, in my studies, not that much. But we do, definitely, I agree, by just what I experienced product-wise in New Zealand and product-wise in Europe, like the food products you can buy at stores, it's a lot different. And again, like coming back to what we said earlier, it's a lot stricter here than I assume it is in New Zealand.
Yeah. I think the old world production methods and things are much better over there. But I think as well, I don't think it should be regulated. To the extent that a lot of people who are now making groundbreaking scientific discoveries could well have been regulated out of the conversation a long time ago, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Why do
so
you...
like the... Oh, yeah?
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just some of the guy that I was sort of started my health journey. I started reading his book, Mark Sisson. He's from California. He used to be a triathlete, and he sort of started talking about a ketogenic approach and endurance sport. So very niche. And during the 80s, because he'd ragged his body trying to do endurance with carb loading and low fat, but the doctors still tell you that low fat's the way to go. So yeah, it's very tricky. Like, would regulation on that side of things limit innovation in the world of nutrition? Possibly.
So, but you would still say, like, being responsible for yourself, what you watch, what you feed. Like, I really love that you call it diet, because it's not only what you eat as in put on your plate, also what you feed your mind. So I think that's a really important message, actually. Like being... just looking out more what you actually consume.
It sounds so hippie, but being mindful.
Mindful, definitely.
I used to hate that word, but it's so true.
No, definitely. Like, would you be able to give us a bit more insight into how you approach social media posts for yourself, since you talked a lot about how important it is for you to not miscommunicate with the people following your Instagram, for example? How do you make sure that you actually communicate the true facts and that you don't come across as communicating misinformation, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. A lot of what I share is kind of it's free information, so it's not necessarily. Well, in fact, it's never eat this to lose fat because that's not how it works. But so with each one of my recipes, I sort of really carefully explain. For example, one of my most popular recipes, 3-ingredient breakfast bake, like a frittata. Yeah, it's yum, but like eggs, bacon, and asparagus. Like so simple, right? But it's important to explain why that's better than a 24-ingredient sugary cereal, if that makes sense. So I don't necessarily go, well, if you eat this, you're going to lose weight versus if you eat that. Or if you eat this, the fat is going to drop off you. But what I do explain is that, 3 natural ingredients is quite a lot easier for your stomach and your gut to digest than the 16-ingredient or 24-ingredient, very, very highly processed cereal or yogurt. I explain the sugar content in a lot of it. So I break it down into teaspoons of sugar for people to make it really nice and easy in layman's terms. So I'm not necessarily telling them what the food is going to do for them because it is all very nuanced. So I started my whole business. I've now got programs that people can buy online to help them lose body fat, basically, is the crux of it. But it all started with tailored nutrition. So different people have different requirements, as we talked about. So, some people, a rugby player who's moving for 6 hours a day, very different to a desk-bound woman who's only managing 1,500 steps. So I think, sharing things like recipes, but explaining why they might be a better alternative. So I think gentle messaging, and I think that's probably quite key with anyone who is sharing information, is that they'll share it with an explanation. I think that's always really important. So they'll explain why. And they'll often give you enough information that you can make up your own mind as to whether you want to believe that's true or not. I think I read a lot of like societal, like cultural articles on things like, for example, what's a recent one? Is a feminized diet making you fat? So I think it's a huge cultural thing at the moment. It's a lot more acceptable for a woman when you're going out to eat to order the granola and the yogurt rather than the full breakfast, or ordering a salad that's probably covered in sugary dressing than ordering the steak. And I think a lot of women try and undereat because they eat these foods that they deem are really feminine, like low-fat crackers and hummus. And actually, if they just ate the food that their body really wanted, it might not have a pretty feminine label on it. It might not come across as feminine to order the steak when you're out with your husband and his friends. But it's really interesting. There's lots of like cultural and nuanced articles and things that I share that could be up for debate, I would say. But it's all, when it boils down to the science, I know it's all true. And I do reference studies often. Like I try and keep it fun so it's easy to digest for people. But it is really important to me that there's like an underlying scientific element, I would say.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great. I think it also kind of sums up a bit what we talked about, the attributes earlier, which you actually also use for yourself to distinguish. That's great.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really good is being able to share like real life stories.
Yeah.
So like real evidence, right? So I've got loads. I'm so lucky. Like the clients I work with, I recorded podcasts with some of them, or I'm like, hey, that message is amazing. Would you mind if I share that? So a message about someone's boobs shrinking, or dropping a couple of dress sizes, or just I'm just so confident. Like, I just don't feel like I need to eat the cake at work anymore. Like, it's anecdotal, but it's factual change, and it's coming from real people. So I think that's a huge element of what I do as well, is so that people can see it working.
And I guess it adds perfectly to like the scientific background. So you have like the scientific background saying, okay, in theory this works, but then having the experience from people, from your clients, saying it actually works for them. Like then you have the
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's their experience, so it's their lived experience and their words that are really awesome. So how it's changed their life or their confidence, or just their weight, like their body weight. And then they also quite often, if people are up for it, because some people enjoy it, some don't, but taking weights and measurements. So I've also got graphs for all the clients who wanted them to show the weight loss across time, which is pretty interesting.
Wow. That's cool.
Cool.
So for my final question, actually, I think we're almost at the end.
This is great time-wise as well.
Awesome, right? And how do you view the role of social media in the next few years in the health sector, basically in the future?
Yeah. I think it's pretty huge, to be honest. Yeah, I think what are the statistics now? I think the average time that any user spends on TikTok is 52 minutes a day.
Wow.
It's terrifying and disgusting. But yeah, that's just TikTok alone.
Crazy.
Yeah, and so that's the kids. I say that's the kids, but I know 30-year-olds. My friend Amanda, if she's listening to this, had to tell her to start getting off TikTok because it's a minefield. So people are spending a lot of time on it. And in my marketing business, I always explain to clients, if they're like, why do I need to bother with Instagram or Facebook and I'm like, well, that's because this is where people spend their time these days. Like, people don't stare at a billboard for longer than 5 seconds. People spend hours and hours scrolling. So I think for food companies, it's huge. Lots of sales to be made, which is a shame, but true. And I do see it in action from like good food companies or like a drinks company in New Zealand, brought out a new flavour. And I know my friend was like, "Oh, I can't wait to try that." So it's like I suppose it's a good method of communicating for food companies, and I think it's also really good for nutrition professionals. Whether or not it's healthy for people and a good place to find your messaging, I'm not entirely sure. And that's a tricky debate as well, because people discover me on Instagram and then they start one of my programs and I'm like, right, okay, you're struggling to sleep. Let's put your phone on flight mode at 7 p.m. No scrolling. Like, I want you to relax and I want you no phones 2 hours before you go to bed. And they're like, oh, damn. Like, so it's, I think it's got a huge element to play in mental health as well.
Yeah.
So, and nutrition and mental health, like I said about information diet, it's very, very intrinsically linked. So I think
there's a link definitely between nutrition, psychology, like it only works together. Also,
exactly. Yeah. I forgot you said you were studying psychology as well. You know this. Yeah.
Definitely. That's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to link it and to study it together.
If this subject that you're studying right now existed when I was at university, I'd be all over it. It's so interesting. And I think back in my day, the geographies of like health and nutrition was like, how close do you live to a fast food outlet? Like, you couldn't just order Uber Eats back then.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, that's changed, I suppose. And And I think one of the biggest elements for you, so nutrition, psychology, social media, I think it can be a dangerous place over the next few years, to be honest. So things like semaglutide and Ozempic, weight loss injections. Are you familiar with those?
I heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that hopefully hasn't reached the Netherlands because you guys have your brains switched on. But in America and in the UK, it's huge. People are just, and you can buy them from over the counter for like $500 or £500 a month.
Wow.
I'm pretty sure. So it started as a drug for diabetes and obesity, and it lowers your weight by reducing your appetite. Makes you quite nauseous, and it makes you lose a hell of a lot of muscle. So when you stop taking it, you rebound like nothing else. But where I was going with this is a lot of really, really famous celebrities shared their stories on TikTok. And that's how it's really, really gained traction, from what I understand. So, and I think that's a huge problem in my eyes, because you're giving people a Band-Aid for a gunshot wound. So you're giving them an injection without teaching them where they were going wrong in the first place, why their nutrition might not have been on point, things that they could do differently, things that they can, ways to move their body and manage their health and make real food choices. Don't bother with that. We'll just give you an injection. You just eat one burger a day instead of 3. Like it's really bad. And I've worked with a couple of clients who've had gastric band surgery. But again, it's the same thing. So you get a gastric band put on, but they don't teach you how to eat at all. A couple of clients have been told to just eat small things like scones or biscuits. So like terrible advice. Yeah, so I think social media can be quite a dangerous place for spreading quick fixes, like we're talking about.
So I guess from what it sounds like, you see it more as a critical thing rather than an advantage in the health sector.
I'm coming across as very skeptical on here, but that's because no one ever asks me these interesting and tough questions. I actually think it's hugely beneficial. Like when I look at, I've think over 200 clients I've worked with now, and social media is one of my only methods of promotion. And these people have lost like probably close to 500 kilos. Over the last 4 years, I've been in business. Like, there's life-changing stuff, and like, people just feel so much better about themselves. They feel educated. Their marriages are better. Their sex lives are better. They feel better in their body. Like, it's life-changing. So that's probably a really good positive note to end on. Is it is empowering people to be able to find people like myself, I suppose. People who are willing to do the research and to seek out the good information. It can be a really great place to find people who are doing good stuff.
Yeah. Again, it comes with like its advantages and disadvantages.
I know. Yeah. I miss university and having debates like this. But yeah, it's tricky to come up with I can't wait to see what you have to send me the study when you guys finish it, because I'm intrigued.
Excited to see what we find, especially because it's such a good comparison between experts and consumer, like you see by like kind of both sides. Yeah. Is there anything we haven't covered yet? You still want to add something to this conversation?
I don't think so, Marie. It's been a joy. So I've probably gone off on a few tangents.
I'm so happy. Like, this was such an interesting and insightful conversation and interview. I loved it.
Good. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you so much for your time.
That's okay, and thanks, Marie. And yeah, hopefully we can get this out in the podcast for people as well.
And I guess so far we both agree that the biggest message is be mindful with whatever you come across and whatever you see, be critical and double check. I think that was the most important message.
Yeah, I think, be mindful and take personal responsibility for your information diet as well as your actual diet.
Yes, definitely.
Probably. Is that I usually do a takeaway dessert on the podcast, so that could be our takeaway.
Do you want to do another takeaway, or is this the main one?
Yeah, give us some insights, Marie, just quickly before we go, on the differences that you've noticed between the Netherlands and New Zealand.
You mean food-wise, or in which aspect?
Yeah, food-wise. What did you miss when you were over here?
I missed bread.
Like good bread?
Yeah, like I'm from Germany and we have really good bread. And going to supermarkets in New Zealand, and it was just like squishy. I don't even know what it was made of, honestly. I just felt so bad because I just missed this really good bread. And like we have so many whole grain breads and like seed breads, and there's like pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds and chia seeds. Like you have like 10 different seeds in one bread. And that's the bread for us, and that's something I really missed over there. And was there something else? I feel like quality-wise, like they had really good quality in New Zealand, especially if it comes to local products. But also, I still think probably because of regulations, the quality is still a bit better, and you had more variety in like whole grains. In Europe, I guess maybe regulations or just what they advertise, what they teach people. And that's what I found really hard to find really good whole grain alternatives, because I think personally, and that's what I also experienced, whole grain is a lot better for me, and I think for digestions as well. And it keeps you energized much longer because it's not as like you don't have your insulin spiking up and then like going down a few minutes later, sort of.
But so, just to explain to any of my clients listening to this, and I've had this debate with my midwife is from the Netherlands as well.
Mm-hmm.
She got gestational diabetes. And she was like, it's because they put sugar in the bread in this country. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. Like, it's very different when Marie's talking about eating bread to what you probably get from the, what's it called? Fresh is best toast in the New Zealand supermarket. Yeah. It's a really good story to share, because like things like I eat pizza in Italy, don't really touch the stuff here unless it's from a really good place.
Difference. Like pizza in New Zealand, I don't know, it was just different.
No, it's not good. It's the flour. So my who was I talking to? It was you were in Queenstown, weren't you?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, there is a chap over there that I'm talking to next week on the podcast, and he does a meal delivery service. And he was saying that a lot of companies have to go to. Basically, there's a company that you can import your flour from Italy and France.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in New Zealand. But most people obviously don't do that. So you can get it here, but it's a completely different product to what we get in New Zealand. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think also the pasta I bought, as far as I remember, I mean, it's quite a while, was also different. Like now that you say that, yeah.
I don't touch grains or pasta here.
I just also think that whole grain, besides keeping you full longer, it's just much more delicious. I think it has a legit flavor to it, while wheat mostly is just so plain. And like I feel like I could probably eat pasta by itself without sauce if it's whole grain, but not if it's plain. You know what I mean? Like there's just certain specific flavor to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I think my main part I missed. Just maybe because I'm German, so.
And I think you're right. I eat so like. People will be wondering why I'm having this conversation with you, because I don't really eat bread and I don't recommend it in any of my programs for people trying to lose body fat. But that is a huge part of that is because the bread over here is terrible, and the context that they eat it in. So like they're not talking about what you're doing, like getting beautiful seed bread and making stuff at home and enjoying it. It's grabbing it in a sandwich or a roll from a bakery in a rush, and it's the lack of kind of home cooking or preparing meals yourself. So much to it.
Yeah.
So is our last takeaway that everyone needs to go to Europe to try the bread?
Yeah, I would say so. Highly recommended if you come to Europe.
Oh dear. On that note, we should probably wrap it up, shall we?
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lifestyle Design Secrets podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, please do stop and take 2 seconds to subscribe and leave us a review. It means the world to us. If you are curious about working with us or checking out our new bite-sized guides or our full body reset transformation programs, please do head on over to our website, which is www.amysfitnessandnutrition.co.nz. Have a great day.